I've recently heard some crazy success stories when it comes to hiring with AI. FedEx is sending offers to candidates within 10 minutes. General Motors saved $2 million in recruiting costs in a year. Chipotle reduced time to hire by 75%. And Nestlé's global recruiting team is saving 8,000 hours annually. The craziest thing, all of these companies did it by leveraging the same technology, Paradox. Paradox is the leader in conversational hiring. Powered by conversational AI, Paradox can be your ATS, CRM, and career site, or can help automate parts of the hiring process on top of Workday, UKG, and SAP. Their product suite is driven by a 24/7 AI assistant who can handle up to 95% of the hiring process for deskless hiring teams, or just automate specific, time-consuming tasks like screening, interview scheduling, and onboarding to allow recruiters to focus on recruiting. Paradox has helped hundreds of the world's top employers simplify hiring and save money while creating great candidate experiences in the process. Spend more time with people, not software, with Paradox. You can find out more by going to paradox.ai.
There's been more of scientific discovery, more of technical advancement and material progress in your lifetime and mine than in all the ages of history.
Hi, Adam, and welcome back to the podcast.
Hey, Matt, great to be with you.
Always great to have you on the show. For people who may not have seen you on the show before or may not have come across your great work, could you introduce yourself and tell everyone what you do?
Sure will. I'm Adam Godson. I'm CEO of Paradox, and Paradox does conversational AI for talent acquisition.
Fantastic. So I checked back through the archives, and it's pretty much a year to the day since you were last on the podcast, and we were talking about everything that was going on with generative AI, how it was moving forward, all those kind of things. So I suppose the perfect way to sort of set the scene is to ask you what's happened in the last 12 months. What have you seen in talent acquisition? What have you seen with AI? How are things evolving?
Yeah, absolutely. I think lots of things have changed in the last year, and it's been a great year. I think maybe number one of things that have changed is the appetite people have to talk about AI and a maturing attitude about AI in talent acquisition. And I think there was maybe some fear and confusion that has moved to curiosity and early execution stages in using AI in talent acquisition. And some of that's come from external pressure, not necessarily the genuine, like I really love change in that way. And so I think we've seen the market move to some degree that way. And then more solution providers, Paradox, of course, using AI in different parts of the product and using multiple language models and finding all the right solutions to the challenge. And so it was maybe seemed simple at one point, but then figuring out the complexities and of how it all works and how AI can benefit us, ultimately trying to get work done.
There are some fundamental shifts potentially going on here, aren't there? Because I've heard you talk before about conversations being the new interface to work. What's this making this possible? How are things going to kind of shift fundamentally from where we are right now?
Yeah, I think the introduction of large language models and new voice models and to some degree video models as well has just led to an accessibility of data and information that was different than before, where we can simply talk to a computer. Every day of my working life, I've gone to log into a machine and using a username and password, then used a graphical user interface and used a mouse or a trackpad to click on things to get information. I use a keyboard to type and search. And that's beginning to change, where I have a question now. I just hold the button on my phone and talk into it, and it with my voice, and it gives me an answer back with its voice. And we can have a conversation back and forth to get to the next level depth of a question. We use co-pilots and other things to assist our work because we understand that they can potentially understand the context of a page or internal information of our company. And that modality has changed. And it's not scary. Modalities have often changed in how we use computers and how we interface with different products. but it is new, and there's lots of discovery and iteration that comes along with that. And I think the way that human beings fundamentally will use computers is beginning to change.
I think that's really interesting. And I was going to agree with you about, every day of my working life, I've logged on with a username and password. And I remembered in my first job, I didn't actually have a computer. So I'm kind of like, I'm that old that we didn't actually have them. But that was only for the first 6 months of my career. I think it's really interesting what you're saying there about voice, actually, because just watching, I have a 9-year-old son, and just watching the way he interfaces with iPads and laptops and all that kind of stuff, it's changed in the last 12 months. He's using his voice all the time as his first default thing to go to, probably because he doesn't like spelling. But it's funny watching that kind of just natural, that natural shift, and watching someone do something that I'm not personally doing, but you can kind of see how that works.
Yeah, because he doesn't remember when it was terrible. He doesn't have have those memories of times where you shouted representative into the phone. And so to him, it's always worked. And as the technology gets better, we overcome the barriers that once existed. I think about trying to get customer support for an airline or something else. It's interesting to hear how people want to interface. Many people want to talk to a person. Other people say, I definitely don't want to talk to a person. I just want to get the job done. And as the chat has gotten better, we see significantly more use of that. And I think that leads into you can say what you want about how people maybe have preferences, but ultimately people want to get work done. And they want to achieve their goal. If they're a candidate, they want to figure out how to get to the decision as fast as possible. If they're a recruiter, they want to find the right people. If they're a coordinator, they want to get the interview scheduled. And so modalities will change and preferences will change, but ultimately people want to get stuff done.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's funny you saying about the, Siri and that used to be quite rubbish. It also didn't used to understand Scottish accents, and my son has a Scottish accent. So he doesn't have that trauma to live with either. So I'm going to talk about where things are going and the kind of the bigger picture business wise in a second. But before we do, it's probably worth contextualizing this a bit for people. Tell us some of the things that your sort of clients are achieving with conversational AI, doing things differently, because you work with, some really big companies who have really big hiring needs. They have to hire very fast. What's changed for them? What are they, what are they doing? What are they achieving?
Yeah, we see companies apply AI differently based on the type of roles they hire for and what they're looking to achieve. So I'll give you a couple of examples. We see tremendous success in volume roles. So we're looking to do some sort of fact-based screening around, do you have this certification? Do you have this skill? Do you have this eligibility to work? Can you work these hours? And be able to get through sort of that sifting process quite quickly and get people connected and be able to take time to hire from 21 days to 3 days for McDonald's, one of our clients. But also being able to, some have gone all the way to lights out hiring and saying, we're going to hire in 10 minutes and say, we're going to do a background check, get you a conditional offer the very first time we interact for some roles. So we see some clients going all the way that way as well. But then I think one of the things that's really important about this era is not trying to generalize one way of hiring, is that looking at the roles and doing some real design work on what the process should be for this type of hire. And it's funny, we all did that before applicant tracking system existed. Did our executive hiring different than our shop floor hiring, different than our corporate hiring. And then when some of the early ATSs forced us into one workflow, it all kind of became homogenous again. So designing that. So redesigning that back out and saying for our corporate roles or our executive roles, we're going to have a more personal a hiring process. And for those, we see a great use case on interview scheduling. So we'll schedule over 25 million interviews this year using AI. And that includes not just the one-to-one interview, but those gnarly 7-part interviews over 2 days in 5 locations, 3 languages, conference room booking, all the things that have been difficult for a long time about that. But being able to use AI, it's a really good problem and that AI can solve. And so I think there's a few kind of core use cases that have really coalesced around both high volume and interview scheduling for professional roles that made a ton of sense and a huge difference for our clients' ROI.
Yeah, and I think it's always interesting because when I'm talking to people about AI and what's possible, I always think that high volume hiring, it's kind of like the future's already here. It's sort of over there, because I think that's where so much of the innovation has been, just because of the pressures those businesses are under and the scale of it and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no question. And I think COVID brought the ROI of that to life. Restaurants that were, you walk in and say, great, there's lots of tables here. And people saying, oh, that section is closed because we don't have staff. And being able to really understand the bottom line of that. And we've had clients that have, I think for the first time in my career, saying, not only did talent acquisition drive us cost savings, it actually drove revenue. Because we were able to have more people out doing jobs that produce revenue for us, whether that's plumbers or electricians or people doing samples in a store, or being able to have real staffing that drives revenue. And I think that's been an interesting case. But you're absolutely right that at the front line, where speed is equivalent to candidate experience, that's been a really impactful use case and is already here.
One of the things that has also struck me is I think that in a lot of ways we're kind of having the wrong conversation about AI in talent acquisition and HR at the moment. And I suppose to illustrate that, I was really struck by the European fintech company Klarna, who earlier in the year said they were replacing 700 customer service roles with AI. Now, I don't know whether they were people they already employed or people they didn't employ or how that kind of worked out, but it seems to have worked out very well for them. They're all over the kind of the business and financial press. The CEO said they're saving millions of dollars. They're looking at how they can bring this to other parts of their business. And ultimately, he said that he thinks they can halve the amount of people who work there. It strikes me that that's the kind of conversation CEOs are having at the moment about productivity and efficiency and all that sort of stuff. But in TA, we seem to be kind of sort of stuck talking about what are the use cases for AI? Should we do this? All this sort of stuff. Do you kind of see that kind of mismatch? And do you think that sort of puts TA in a vulnerable and dangerous position?
I do. I see that mismatch. I see businesses projecting company growth and staff decay. For the first time in my career, large businesses saying we plan to grow 10% per year for the next 5 years, but our staff is going to be flat or down 10%. And I think in the past you'd say, well, how's that going to happen? That doesn't make sense. And the use of AI is in the plans of companies to really drive margin, to be frank. And in many ways it will. It's just in time, given birth rates and labor shortages around the world. And I think that there are ways that we can talk about the macro of how that will shape out. But I think from a talent acquisition perspective, this is the era where progressive teams have a chance to get things done. Teams that wait 3 years, 5 years, are going to have things done not on their request. It's going to be done for them. And so I think there is an urgency of action and thinking about where do I get started? Where can I think about what the ways are that we can begin to automate this? The future is somewhat inevitable in this case, but it's also about good design. And so I people that have heard me talk about it say, I think there are two types of recruiters in the future. There are people that are going to design systems of how things get done. They're going to design the delivery. They're going to design the experience. But AI will do most of the actual work and the delivery in that system. People will be inserted at certain points in the process. So this is the convince them to join step. But then I also think there's going to be some back to basics for recruiters as well, from some of the people that really can convince people to join, where AI can't have that emotional connection with someone. I'm not going to uproot my life, move across the world, those types of huge decisions without having a connection with someone, about having that emotional part. And so I think there will be a great place for recruiters in the world. And as long as there's competition for talent, there will be talent acquisition teams. How those teams look is going to be vastly different than it does today. And I think that's a good thing. I think there's a lot of people that wish they were spending time convincing candidates to join and making emotional connections, and they're actually just clicking in their systems and they're doing administrative work. And we hope to really bifurcate those things to say, let's design great systems that give us flow, and let's really spend time talking to people.
No, absolutely. And I suppose it's in terms of kind of how we get there and how teams get there. I suppose that the first part of it is really redefining the conversation. And rather than talking about AI, it's talking about, where does AI get us to? What's the outcome of it? Is that the right way to think, do you think?
Yeah, I think it's really about how do we just change the way that we work in all the ways, and think about how do we be sure that we're good partners to the business as talent acquisition, getting it the talent that it needs in the most efficient way possible. And I think recruiting has to start to look more like a business function in itself, and it needs to use AI to power the things that it does. And the teams that realize that early are going to be the teams that are have an edge in being most successful.
You've seen a number of companies kind of go through this process at almost kind of the speed of light in the last few years. What would your advice be to everyone else? You know, there are lots of people out there who they're not sure what's going on. You know, TA teams are under pressure from everywhere at the moment in terms of finding talent, in terms of budgets, in terms of all those kind of things. And obviously there's a nervousness around things like regulation and ethics and all that kind of stuff. How do people get moving? What should they focus on? What's the way forward?
Yeah, I think certainly having a point of view is really important. So I think understanding how they want their organization to use AI, and what their talent acquisition team's point of view is important. I think the second is finding the spot to start, and to start today. And if people ask me all the time, where should I start? I think there's a couple. The two proven use cases make a lot of sense. Find a spot in your organization where you've got volume recruiting, automate the heck out of it, and show tremendous wins. The second would be interview scheduling, especially if you're on Workday or SAP or some other core system. Being able to go on top of that in a deeply integrated way are two just winning use cases to get started. And then from there, you typically do not have to ask for adoption. People will beat down the doors to say, I saw what you did in that department. How do I do that with my team? And getting that to spread in different geographies, different parts of the business, and finding the ways that you can be more productive. And I think focusing on how to make the talent acquisition team a star in that way, and to make it effective. It doesn't have to be, all about AI. It's really about productivity, and how did you make your team so much better in a relatively short period of time? People will come knock, and they'll ask for more.
The candidate experience is a big part of this as well, isn't it?
Absolutely. Well, that's one of the interesting parts. Is I think there was a time where automation and candidate experience people thought were different ends of a spectrum, and what we find is it's not. Is that the experience is actually better. There's significantly higher satisfaction using AI than not using AI, partially because of speed. Able to schedule an interview in 12 minutes versus 5 days. No one was getting self-actualization from that interview scheduling process that they wanted to wait 5 days for it. They wanted it to be right, and they want it to be fast. And so getting that done right and fast, it leads to higher satisfaction. And the same with a volume process. Our friends at Chipotle, for example, said we want someone to get an interview as fast as they can get a burrito. And being able to say, accomplish that led to some wow moments, and being able to say, great, this actually is a way better experience than waiting around for someone to get back to me.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because it's just in terms of like how we've all moved on in terms of our expectations, which has always kind of happened with technology. But, I'm just thinking of, I recently opened a new bank account, which I could do on my phone in less than 5 minutes and scan my ID and all that kind of stuff, as opposed to probably 10 years ago having to go into a bank with some forms. And in lots of ways, recruitment hasn't kind of moved on from that, going into the bank with lots of forms, and people's expectations have. If I can set up a bank account in 2 minutes, why can't I apply for a job and get an interview in the same kind of way?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I was reflecting the other day about like even the e-commerce revolution, and I don't know if there's really anyone that is super satisfied with the talent acquisition process today. Recruiters, candidates, companies, we've put sort of this nicer interfaces in some ways in the last generation of e-commerce on things, but Amazon I can pick out something that's shipped to my house in that same day. Recruiting, it took 45 days to get hired 20 years ago. It takes 45 days to get hired now. And so I think that's the promise of AI, to actually make the back end changes and be able to really run processes in a way that's frictionless, and to run as fast as organizations can run. And I think the decision making still, in this era, can be assisted by AI, but should be done by humans. And so being sure that humans are still in the loop of decisions today. And so it won't run, same day all the time in that case. But I think getting all the friction out of the process to get to the essence and the core of the decision is something we absolutely can accomplish, and to be sure that we take friction out of labor markets, which will ultimately impact economies. And economies will be able to move faster. People will be able to get food on their table faster and be able to get products and services faster. And what we do really can improve the way that economies function.
I suppose with recruitment, it's almost like there's this kind of overstory in recruitment about how recruitment works. You have a CV, you have an interview, and the internet never actually changed that. It kind of made it quicker in some ways, slower in other ways, but it didn't change that kind of fundamental mechanic of how people think and apply for jobs. And I think what's interesting about this AI revolution is it does change that. And for lots of people, that's really that's kind of really disconcerting, because it's kind of rethinking something that has always been the same.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a concept we talk about internally called skeuomorphism, sort of like making things seem familiar of like a past generation. It started with my son actually came to me with a floppy disk, like an old 3.5-inch floppy disk. And he said, like, why do you have the save icon? I had to think about that for a moment, and then I was like, oh, because to him, this has never appeared in a physical form, but we made the icon look like save because that's what save meant in a certain generation. And so I think there will be, as AI takes hold, there will be things that give us familiarity and give us the social expectation of what things look like in a recruiting process. But I also think that a lot of it makes no sense in an AI era. Like why is a CV produced of like what I want to tell you about me, not what maybe objectively actually happened, or why do you get to edit these things, and then I go do a background check later and check to see if what you said was true. And so there's some things that are incongruous there based on the legacy of technology that I think we'll sort out and ultimately reduce friction in the next phase.
I think I've asked you this question before, but I'm going to ask it to you again. All the rapid change that's been going on in the last since the pandemic, basically, things have sort of moved quicker than any of us thought they probably could. What surprised you most in the last sort of 12 months in terms of what's possible or in terms of what's happened?
One of the things that actually has surprised me a little bit is I thought things would be moving even faster. And part of that is just underestimating the ability of like both people and organizations to digest change. And things are moving quickly in some ways. But I think if you'd asked me in 2022 what I thought 2025 looked like, I would have thought we would be in existential crisis mode for anyone that isn't using AI actively in their processes. I think people who aren't using AI today are falling behind, but I don't think it's reached sort of crisis level for them. It still is like an opportunity to be early and to gain competitive advantage, where maybe I thought 2 years ago we might be even further along than we are.
And I guess it's actually an opportunity for TA leaders to set the direction, to put a vision out there and go towards it, rather than having that kind of forced upon them, isn't it?
It is. Like we did a Harvard Business Review piece maybe last year, and I think 97% of organizations that use AI in the process got value from it and thought it was a good investment, but like 11% of surveys thought their participants were using it. And so that just tells me that it is working, and that there's time yet to get competitive advantage in that. And we're starting to see some of the laggard industries, or traditionally laggard industries like mining and banking and other things that are compliance heavy, come along now as well, which tells me that like the ROI stories are really powerful. And even some of the maybe not as traditional innovative industries are saying, yes, we can get advantage and we want it.
And you've kind of already anticipated my final question, which is, I always like to ask questions about the future, but how much change do you think we are going to see in the next 12 months? So if we were talking again in December 2025, what are we going to be talking about? What will have happened in the next 12 months? It's a very difficult question. It's actually more difficult to answer than if I'd said 5 years, I think.
I agree with you. It is. It's the old place of we underestimate change in the long term, overestimate in the short term. First of all, let's do it. Let's make it an annual thing. Let's talk every December. So let's be sure we connect next December. We can see how I did. But I think we see a year full of adoption of AI in some of the core pieces. I think a lot of companies will choose to get started, and getting started in a spot that is simple or a spot that is a significant pain point. And so I think there will be companies that choose to get started. I also think that this year is going to be a year of some chaos, where companies or job seekers will write their resume with AI. Companies will begin to read resumes with AI and then try to find ways to get signal. And that'll lead to more assessments and in-person interviewing and other things, that this game of whack-a-mole of trying to figure out how we get signal. And so I think the next year is going to be fairly chaotic, but I do think lots of companies will get started with AI in some way to take the first step and then begin to develop their longer vision for how we think talent acquisition looks in a fully AI-driven future.
Adam, thank you very much for talking to me.
Matt, always great to talk to you.
My thanks to Adam. You can follow this podcast on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can search all the past episodes at recruitingfuture.com. On that site, you can also subscribe to our weekly newsletter, Recruiting Future Feast, and get the inside track on everything that's coming up on the show. Thanks very much for listening. I'll be back next time, and I hope you'll join me.
This is my show.